Discuss the issues at hand right now in Washington and across America, as we all are so concerned with what is happening to our economy. Those of you out there are up late at night wondering how you're going to be paying that mortgage, wondering how the car payment is going to be made, and which payments you'll make this month and which payments you may have to put off for another time. We're all doing it. We might as well all admit it. And it's time to come together for solutions and answers. And we as GOP women in Congress know how important these issues are. We are the women that are taking care of our children, we're taking care of our households, we're taking care of our parents and their health care needs, and we're watching out for our neighbors to make sure that they're okay. And we continue on this path. We simply cannot run on this path of unsustainable spending and financial uncertainty. We need jobs back in this country. There are those who have jobs and are worried if they're going to be able to keep them. And yet there are others who have lost their jobs and wonder if they'll be able to find another job. We understand this. We understand that it's affecting all of our households, and we're going to come together and discuss these very important issues. And before we get started, I'm just going to pass along to you one of the greatest quotes that I think hits home to all of us from Ronald Reagan. All great change in America begins at the dinner table. How true is that? We all know, now many of our households, we don't all eat dinner together anymore like we used to. When I was growing up, dinner time was a specified time, and we all came together, and if you didn't get to the table, you didn't eat. But today, we're all on different schedules, but that dinner table still remains. And we still sit there and we discuss these issues with our spouses. My husband is a doctor. Brent is a surgeon. He practices in Dunn, North Carolina. We have a son, Ben, who's 16. I'm worried about his future. I'm worried about my husband's practice because he is suffering, realizing that the volume of patients he once was seeing has decreased. That's out of fear, and that's out of the healthcare system that we have created now. So as we move forward, I'm going to be introducing to you some of the greatest women that I have had the honor of getting to know here in D.C. I have many friends back home, but these ladies are my family here. And I'm going to start off with my esteemed colleague from North Carolina, Ms. Sue Myrick. And she has been a mentor to me, but mostly a friend. And I thank you, Sue, for coming today and sharing your thoughts.
Well, it's my honor to be here, and I thank you for yielding me the time. You know, as you said, we have a lot of colleagues here, and most of us share the same ideas relative to what we're about. You mentioned and are talking there about the dinner table and women being financial planners. We do the budget. We're the ones that take care of our families. As you said, we're the health care providers, all of that. But you know, you mentioned your husband's in business, but I also am a former small business owner. And when I look at what's happening today, there are so many businesses. I think there are like 400 new businesses every day that are started by women in this country. And when I talk to business owners at home, they say to me, you know, I'm really concerned about the fact that I could expand my business, but I'm afraid to because of the uncertainty that's out there. I don't know what policies are coming down. I don't know what kind of health care costs I'm going to have. I don't know what tax policies and what, if I hire somebody, it's going to cost me to retain that employee. I don't want to go out and hire them and train them and then have to turn right around and, you know, maybe let them go because I can't afford to keep them. And so the policies that we're working on, and all the women in Congress on our side of the aisle that really care about these issues, are to make sure that we put policies in place that help and promote those small businesses to exist, because they hire most of the people in the country. Most of the jobs are provided by small business, and it's really important. I also, from another standpoint, used to be the mayor of Charlotte. Unfortunately, the first and only female mayor. I wish somebody else would run on the female side. But that's beside the point. What I wanted to say is that we had to operate with a balanced budget.
That's right.
Very simple, you know, and you can do it. And we've been talking this week and actually passed the bill yesterday of cut, cap, and balance. I mean, what a novel idea. It's the way all of us live all the time. It's how we do our business. And there's no reason the federal government, like the 49 states that balance their budget, can't be living under a balanced budget. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, we have to make some hard decisions, but the bottom line in all of that is we can do it. And if we have the resolve, the American people want us to do it. There's no such thing as government money. It's all the taxpayers who send their money up here to Washington. That's what we're spending, and we've been spending too much of it. So I'm encouraged by the fact that we really did have a vote on that bill yesterday that says, you know, we're going to live within our means, we're going to do what you do every day, and that we as women can have a voice in that, and we'll continue to have a voice in that. And I thank you so much for putting this together so we have a chance to express that to the American people.
Thank you so much. I yield now to Ms. Herrera Butler from Washington. Thank you so much for coming together. She is one of my fellow freshmen, and we have gotten to be good friends.
Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be here. You know, this is one of the most, I'd say, monumental times we faced as a nation. We are right now making decisions that are not just going to impact those of us here today, but our children and our children's children. I am so proud to be a part of this body that passed a bipartisan solution to our budgeting problems just yesterday. We passed, like the gentlelady spoke about, a balanced budget amendment. You know, I know there's a lot of controversy happening right now, and it's frustrating to watch people posture here in Washington, D.C. Folks back home are sending me emails, and they're calling me saying, can you just get some solutions done, Washington? And, you know, my response is I completely agree. It is frustrating to watch partisan bickering taking place. And I kind of smile to myself, and I think, just put more women in charge, because we're going to fight for solutions. And that's what we're here doing today, promoting the solutions that we were able to pass off the floor just yesterday, solutions that require this House, this body, not to spend more money than it has coming in. You know, it shouldn't be a radical concept. It shouldn't be controversial in the least. Every mother watching this, every mother in America, a daughter, sister, aunt, understands you cannot spend more money each month than you have coming in. You know, women in the household tend to be the decision makers when it comes to finances, to health care, to education, to parental, you know, taking care of older parents or family. Women tend to be those decision makers, which gives us a solution-oriented bent, which is why we're here today saying, we are willing to work with anybody who puts a plan on paper to move this country forward that reduces government overspending. Again, very simple. Don't spend more than you have coming in every month. That is a plan to economic prosperity. Don't treat small business owners, many of whom are women. Don't treat small business owners as your personal piggy bank. You can't just go back to the cash cow every time you want to spend more money. You know, it's ironic. Margaret Thatcher, in fact, I saw this quote, I think it was yesterday, basically said, and I'm going to paraphrase her a little loosely, but she said, the problem with socialists is eventually they run out of other people's money. And that's the reality. Women understand you just can't live beyond your means for sustained amounts of time. And it's, you know, for too long, people of both parties, right, Republicans and Democrats, overspent. Both people of both parties in the White House have overspent. We can talk a long time about what got us here, but that's not going to get us out of the mess. What we need now is our solutions. And the solution that was passed yesterday, again, a bipartisan solution to cut the overspending, cap future growth of government, and balance our budget, is a solution that's going to get our country on a path to prosperity. It's going to tell job creators, keep doing what you do best. Entrepreneurs, keep dreaming, hire more people. Here in my neck of the woods in Southwest Washington, we have double-digit unemployment. Three years plus now of families hurting. Enough is enough. I encourage the Senate, I encourage the White House to come to an agreement, show us something on paper. We're willing to work together and to negotiate. We're all about making a solution happen for the American people. But let's live within our means. It shouldn't be that difficult. So with that, I thank the gentlelady for putting this together. I'm proud to be a part of it, and I yield back.
Thank you so much. And I yield now to my very good friend from Alabama, Ms. Roby, who is the mother of two, and she is wise beyond her years.
Well, I thank you very much for those kind remarks. And again, what an honor and a privilege to be here on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives, representing Alabama's 2nd District, but also here just to embrace the very quote that you began with. All great change in America begins at the dinner table, from President Ronald Reagan. And as I sit here and I've been listening to my colleagues, I can't help but reflect back on my time as a child around the dinner table with my parents and my siblings. And I'm so grateful for the parents that I have that encourage debate, yet taught me the responsibility that I have as an American and as an individual. And certainly I credit my wonderful parents for the opportunities that I've had to lead me to this place today, to have the privilege of honoring, the privilege and honor of representing Alabama's 2nd District. And this week, this Congress is embarking on a historical path. And we all understand the responsibility that we have, and each of us brings to the table a unique sense as women, as those who pump gas and go to the grocery store and see the rising cost of milk. We bring a perspective to this Congress that I think is vitally important to demonstrate exactly where this country is now. The people that are having to make the choice between whether they're putting food on their table or gas in their pump so that they can get to their job to provide for their family. And so, again, thank you for letting me be part of this. All of us that are here on the floor today, since the day we walked in, particularly this past January, we have been fighting to tighten the belt around the government's belt. Every American has done so in the past several years, and it's time that this federal government does the same. We did it with the continuing resolution. We did it with the House budget resolution, and we've been doing it throughout the appropriations process, and we have done it this week. Our children, my children's children, they deserve a future free of crushing taxes so that they have the same opportunity that I mentioned I had before. They deserve to be free from a life of indebtedness to China. The Cut, Cap, and Balance Act ensures that we fulfill our constitutional obligation to pay our debts. We're at a place right now, you and I could never call up our credit card company and say, hey, credit card company, I've maxed out my card. I don't have any cash to pay you the interest on what I already owe. So could you just increase my credit limit? Can you imagine? Can you imagine going to your husband and saying, I maxed it out, but I need a little bit more, so I'm just going to call the credit card? That's exactly what's going on here. And if we don't insist, just like you and I would in our home, just like our spouses would, just like we would for our children, if we do not insist that there be significant spending reforms where we cut up that credit card and say no more, your child wouldn't change his or her behavior if you just continued to give them more, nor would you change your behavior if your credit card company allowed that kind of action. We should require the same of our federal government as we do in our homes. It is so urgent that we provide the American people with honest solutions. And I believe that we have demonstrated that this week, and I look forward to the next coming weeks as we can do all that we can as Republican women to help turn this tide of spending in this country so that we can save this country for the next generation. It cannot be about the next election. It must be about the next generation. Thank you so much, and I yield back.
I'd now like to yield to my very, very special friend, Ms. Biggert from Illinois, who has been a voice of reason. She is a strong woman here in Congress for us in the GOP conference, and I appreciate all of her remarks, which are always extremely thoughtful.
Thank you. Thank you, and I thank you for doing this. I think that we've got such great women that have come into this Congress in this last term, and you are all moving forward and really, I think, setting the tone for what's going to happen in the future, and I appreciate that. But it is time for America to live within its means, and I got a email from a constituent from Lockport, Illinois recently, and she wrote to me imploring Congress to say no to all personal income tax increases. And she further explained that she's a single mom, and just think of how many single moms there are out there having to work to keep their kids clothed and in school and to keep her home going. She said that she is a single mom struggling to keep her home, raise her son, and pay her bills. She says, I cannot pay any more taxes. I will lose everything. And there are so many like that out there. A gentleman from Downers Grove, Illinois, wrote to me and said, it's sad to see the constant disagreement in Washington over almost all issues, including national security, foreign affairs, etc. But the budget must be controlled. This is the hard-earned money of American taxpayers that must be spent wisely. Less is better. We must live on budgets and not be able to borrow whenever we run out of money, as the gentlelady just said. We don't have a credit card. Most people don't have the credit card that they can go and get their limit raised. Neither should we. We have to cut taxes and stop spending. So let's get people back to work so that this country can prosper and be great again. For too long, the government spent the taxpayers into a debt that they cannot afford, and despite trillions in the so-called stimulus, the economy has grown only weaker as a result. So consider these troubling statistics. Our tax burden is approaching the highest levels in our country's history and is expected to rise. Unless we take action now, it could exceed 20% of GDP in just 3 years, a record we've only seen once in 35 years. Similarly, household taxes are excessively high, even in a slow economy. At over $18,000 last year, the average household tax burden has almost doubled in the last 50 years. What's worse is that the interest on our debt for 1 year is equal to the entire budgets of the Department of Labor, Agriculture, and the Veterans Affairs combined. In individual terms, it means that each American's share of our debt is over $46,000. When I think of my family and future generations, this means that my 9 grandchildren would collectively owe over $414,000 if they had to pay their share of our debt today. Before my youngest grandson graduates from college, he would owe $103,000 on our national debt. This is unacceptable. And that's why we took this first step to address the crisis yesterday by passing the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act. And our colleagues across the aisles would argue that this plan goes too far by restricting future borrowing. But the reality is that this bill simply caps spending at the same sustainable rates as past generations, about 20% of GDP, a post-World War II average, no more and no less. Don't we care as much about our children and grandchildren as our parents did? I do, and so do the people who sent us here to Congress. So we need to show our creditors, our competitors, and the American people that we are willing to make the tough choices needed to restore confidence and growth in the United States. And I'm so proud of all the women that are participating in this and are really making a difference and showing that we can move forward and balance our budget and live within our means like families all across America. So I thank you for being
Thank
here.
you. And to your points, I would just like to refer to this chart right here. As you can see, we have two individuals who are talking about how they're going to pay those taxes. And that checkbook right there, with obviously a nice lady's hand filling out that check. And we don't know what it's for, but we all know that feeling. And this actually ran in the Chicago Tribune, May 6th of 2011. It says, financial planners say they're seeing more women becoming the sole decision makers when it comes to the family's finances, as you were speaking. More and more women are taking on the role of their family's chief financial officer. They set the budget, pay the bills, make the grocery list, and can tell you how much it truly costs to run the family. And I believe that the American people, as you do, should be able to know how much it costs to run the country, and we should stick to that budget as well. Thank you so much for your comments.
Thank you.
I'd now like to yield to my good friend who the last time we had a special orders, I just literally watched her because she is a numbers person, and I am always so impressed by that because I am not a numbers person. So thank you to the gentle lady from Kansas. She is, again, just so incredibly smart. And I thank you, Lynn Jenkins, for coming today to help us with this effort.
Well, I thank the gentlelady from North Carolina for yielding. I am Lynn Jenkins from the 2nd Congressional District in Kansas, a proud Republican woman, a mother of 2, and a CPA with nearly 20 years of experience helping small businesses, major corporations, and American families budget and return to solvency. You see a family up there in the picture, and I have spent nearly 2 decades working with families across the dinner table to help them chart their way back to prosperity and fiscal responsibility. And I can tell you that if you want to be serious about balancing your budget and returning to solvency, you have to look at both sides of the ledger. You have to look at what you're taking in and what you're spending. You have to look at your assets and your liabilities. And when it comes to spending and liabilities, it seems that in this town there is some consensus that Washington does indeed have a spending problem. The time to rein in this out of control, wasteful Washington spending and debt is long overdue. That is why the House has passed a responsible, fact-based budget that will curb federal spending by more than $6 trillion over the next 10 years, and why just yesterday we passed a measure to again cut spending by trillions of dollars and cap any future spending as a part of a deal to grant the president his request to raise the debt ceiling. But it is our assets that make our country truly blessed, because our greatest asset is the strength, the drive, and the ingenuity of the American worker and the American business owner. That is why we need to enhance this asset and therefore increase our revenues in a way that grows the economy. And it is not to hit our small businesses with tax increases or more regulation, but rather to institute these pro-growth policies like House Republicans are doing in our efforts to reform the tax code, to make it fairer and flatter, to increase exports by finally passing the 3 pending trade agreements, increase our energy production, and remove the burdensome regulations that are stifling growth and hiring. You simply can't tax your way out of this mess and into a robust economy. You have to grow your way out of it. You don't have to take my word for it. The president himself agreed with me just last year when he said raising taxes would, and I quote, just take more demand out of the economy and put businesses in a further hole. Balancing our budget is critical to our future, just as it is critical to every business and family across this great country. So it's my hope that the establishment here in Washington can finally see the errors of its ways, make real cuts to this out-of-control spending binge, put hard caps on the attempts to increase spending in the future, and establish some pro-growth policies that will lift us out of this stagnant economy and into prosperity the American people deserve. I yield back.
Thank you so much. And I now yield to my good friend from South Dakota, part of our freshman leadership, part of our freshman class, who has truly shown her leadership. And thank you for coming today, Ms. Noem. I'm very excited to hear your comments.
Oh, thank you. And I thank the gentlelady for leading, or for yielding to me today. I certainly appreciate it. And Mr. Speaker, I rise today not only as a proud Republican woman as well, as my good colleague from Kansas said, but also as a wife and as a mother and as an American concerned about Washington, D.C.'s spending habits. We not only need a solution to dig ourselves out of the situation that we are in, but we need to make sure that we don't find ourselves back in the same place. We need to make sure that we are putting us on a new fiscal path that certainly addresses the problems that we have in front of us. The frustrating thing about that entire process is that this president has been on the sidelines. You know, certainly we all know the biblical phrase that without a vision the people perish, and that's truly what's happening to America today, is that we don't have a leader who's been willing to step forward and give us a plan to tell us what he truly thinks are the options that are available to us. Instead, that's been left to others to lead, and he's been more than willing to stand on the sidelines and to criticize every single one of those options that have been brought forward. In fact, his original budget, which was proposed in February of this year, failed to even address our most difficult problems. While the Democrat-led Senate voted down his budget unanimously, no one jumped on board because they recognized that under his plan that we doubled our debt in 5 years and tripled it in 10. It certainly wasn't going to be the answer to what we needed to prevent this most predictable financial crisis that we find ourselves in. You know, since then, the executive branch has failed to provide the American people with a solid plan to move forward. During a House Budget Committee hearing, the CBO director, Douglas Ellmers, referenced President Obama's revised budget speech by saying this: "We don't estimate speeches. We need much more specificity than was provided in that speech for us to do our analysis." And essentially what he was saying was, we can't score a speech. We don't know what a speech means. Anybody can give a really great speech. What we need is leadership. We need someone to step up to the table, tell us what we need to do to address our problems so we can put it into action. House Republicans have taken this lead. In the looming budget crisis, we've shown time and time again that we're serious about cutting our spending. We're serious about balancing our budget. In January, we passed H.R. 1 that continued funding through 2011, only to have it stalled by the Senate, which in effect essentially delayed any action until it got down to the brink of a government shutdown. In March, we passed our budget plan for fiscal year 2012. We're still waiting more than 800 days for the Senate to pass any kind of anything that resembles a budget. We're doing our work here in the House, but we can't do it alone. We need a willing partner in the President. We need a willing partner in the Senate. Last night, the House again passed yet another plan to get our fiscal house in order. We voted overwhelmingly to support cut, cap, and balance. I supported this plan because my constituents have been calling for weeks, telling me to support serious change, serious spending cuts, and a balanced budget amendment. They realize they can't spend more money than what they have in their households. They want their government to have some common sense. South Dakota families and businesses understand the need to balance a checkbook. Our country, just like our families, can't continue to spend more than it makes. Even my 9-year-old son realizes that. You know, recently he had the chance to come out with me to Washington, D.C., and he wanted to spend some time at the Spy Museum. He'd been talking about it for months. So he did a lot of chores around the ranch to earn some money. But when he got there and he got to walking through the gift shop, he realized he didn't have enough money to buy everything that he wanted. He saw a lot of things he wanted to take home with him, but he didn't have the money. So he had to prioritize. He had to pick and choose and leave some things there because he simply couldn't afford that. Sure, was he disappointed? Absolutely. He was heartbroken. But I tell you what, that taught him a life lesson that he will only learn from people that have common sense, that understand you cannot spend money that you do not have, and you have to prioritize and make choices. America is out of money. We know this, and President Obama knows this. And yes, we do need fundamental tax reform. Yes, we need to identify our priorities. And yes, we absolutely have to stop spending money we don't have. Strong leadership, action, courage, along with responsible solutions are needed from all of us if we want to preserve the American dream for our kids and our grandkids. As a wife, mother, and a Republican woman, I support a balanced budget amendment, smaller government so my kids can grow up with liberties and freedoms, and so that they don't have to worry about paying the bills that we're continuing to rack up in this country. It's time to change our ways, and I certainly thank the gentlewoman for yielding to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. And, you know, it's interesting. We all have our stories, our anecdotes about our household budgets and what we're dealing with. My son is 16 years old, and he just received his driver's license just a couple months ago. But the deal with him is, Ben, you can't get a car until you finish that Eagle Scout project. And you're going to have to be responsible to pay for the gas that goes in it. Well, there's not a day that goes by here in Washington that I don't receive a picture that he texts me of the newest truck that he's found or the newest Jeep. But there again, he understands the deal. The deal is no vehicle until the Eagle Scout project is at least underway. And I'm yielding on that. I'm negotiating with him. But that's the plan. And you know, sometimes, as you said, we just can't have everything that we want. In a perfect world we could, but we can't. Because when taxpayer dollars are being spent, it's not an endless flow of money coming into Washington that's from some unknown source. It's taxpayer dollars that we're spending. We have to be good stewards of that. And what better way to do that than the cut, cap, and balance plan that we passed here in the House just yesterday evening? It was so incredibly powerful to see those numbers up on the board, and to think that we could actually put a balanced budget amendment in place, which is basically amending the Constitution. This would be historical, a historic moment for us, and we'll be part of it. And President Obama will be the president that puts that forward for future generations. And I just, again, I'm so proud of it. And you know, like I said, when you bring it home, we all have to deal with those budgets in our own household. Washington should be doing the same. I'd like to yield now to our vice chair, another member of leadership and just a voice of understanding, reason, and leadership for the GOP women, vice chair of our GOP conference, Ms. McMorris Rogers. Thank you so much for coming to offer your comments.
Thank you very much. I'm proud to be here this evening to join the Republican women, and I want to especially thank you as our leader from North Carolina. I'm proud that you're one of the dynamic Republican women freshmen that joined the House this year. And as I think about what the solution is that faces America, I believe Republican women are a big part of that solution. And we see that you know, for all the people in America that are frustrated with leaders in Congress that go behind closed doors and strike a deal without putting it to the people, Republican women, especially women, are seen as being honest, as trustworthy, as problem solvers, and Republican women are also seen as being fiscally responsible and the ones that I believe are a big part of the solution. So I'm proud to join you all this evening. In so many ways, we are at a crossroads here as a country, and we've had record unemployment now, over 9% for a record amount of time. We've also reached a record in our spending, and as I think most people in the country are aware, the president has asked Congress to raise this debt ceiling by $2.4 trillion to get us through November of 2012. That's his request. And the Republicans believe that it is very important that as we look at our fiscal situation, that we are not just continuing down the current path of raising the debt ceiling, of adding to the credit cards, but that we are changing course, that we are cutting up those credit cards. And I think it's important for people to realize what that means for them and their family. This request would be $20,000 for every American family, $20,000 in additional debt for every American family across this country. And it is very important before we vote to raise that debt, add that debt to our families moving forward, that we change course. And the real question in my mind is whether or not the president recognizes that we cannot continue down this path. When you think about our future, economic opportunities, national security interests, it is very important that we change paths. And that's why I am proud of the legislation that passed the House last night with an overwhelming majority. We actually got some Democrat votes. It's a bipartisan bill that passed the House with 234 votes. And now it's over in the Senate. And we already know that 37 senators have signed on to support this bill. And we want to make sure that America realizes that there is a plan on paper that has passed the House and does have support in the Senate, and we want to continue to build on that support. Cut, cap, and balance is a reasonable, it's a credible plan to addressing where we find ourselves as a country. Yes, it includes cuts in current year spending. It includes caps as we move forward so that we're going to bring down how much we're spending, and it includes the balanced budget amendment. I'm, like so many, a strong supporter of the balanced budget amendment. When I was first running for Congress in 2004, I talked a lot about the balanced budget amendment. What I didn't appreciate was to what degree the federal government spends money, borrows money, and prints money with no limits. I thought, well, there must be some limits. There are no limits on the federal government's ability to borrow, to spend, and print money. And the balanced budget amendment was one that even Thomas Jefferson, after they finished writing the Constitution, said if I could make one change, it would be to limit the federal government's ability to borrow money. It's been a debate through the ages. It is long overdue, and this is a time. It's about America's future, and I'm proud to stand here tonight in support of cap, cut, and balance, and the balanced budget amendment, and getting our fiscal house in order for our economy today and for keeping the American dream alive for many years to come. And I thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd like to yield now to the gentlelady from West Virginia, Ms. Moore Capito.
Well, thank you. I'd like to thank my colleagues here today for the opportunity to talk about something that's extremely important to every woman in America, every person in America. It's really not a man or a woman thing or a child or a grandparent thing. It's all of us. And so I look at things a lot of times, I think like a lot of people, I kind of try to put my own life filter over what's going on here. And I'm in the sandwich generation. I have elderly parents who are having some bumpy roads with their health. And I just today, for the very first time, had my only and most beautiful granddaughter with me today on the house floor. And I realized poor little Celia has $45,000 worth of national debt on her head. And then I think about my parents trying to manage their health care, manage their finances in their senior years. Have they prepared enough? Did they make the right choices? And I think about all of that in-between generation of which I am, and I know that we want to make the right choices for ourselves too, so that when our children are taking care of us, those decisions can be easier for them, and we can be well prepared. And quite honestly, with a $14 trillion debt, I don't think we're going to be prepared. What kind of handcuffs are we putting on our future generations? I think about at times in my life when maybe I've gone up to the limit on my credit card, or maybe things haven't been as particularly when we were younger, trying to buy a house for the first time, trying to figure out how we're going to manage the dollars when we were first getting started. And when we realized that maybe we were going a little over the limit or spending too much, was the first thing we thought about? Was it, let's get a loan, let's ask our parents for more money? No, the first thing you think about is, how are we going to cut back here? How are we going to save? How are we going to live within our means? Because that's the reasonable and rational way. That's the way our parents did it, and that's the way we've tried to do it. But that's not the way things go on here in Washington. Instead of trying to 'cause a lot of people say, why is it just only about cutting spending? Because if we don't prove and show that we can cut spending at the beginning, before we talk about anything else, we're never going to do it. And I think those are the hard decisions. Those are the kitchen table decisions. All great change in America begins at the dinner table. That's a Ronald Reagan quote. That's absolutely true. And so I think that's why I think the cut, cap, and balance bill that we passed yesterday makes so much sense to a lot of American women around the kitchen table, because that's what they're doing. And so I think, when we think about in terms of the balanced budget, when I listened to the debate yesterday, I think about my home state of West Virginia. We have a balanced budget. We have hundreds of $1 million in surplus right now, because we are not permitted by law to spend more than we bring in. And so we had a good year this year for a lot of different reasons, but I think some of it is the smart budgeting that we did up front as a state, make tough decisions as a state to make sure that at the end of the year, we're not dipping into the rainy day fund, that we're not finding ourselves saying the only way we can save ourselves is to raise somebody's taxes. It's because the spending decisions that were made in the front end with a budget. We have a budget for the first time in, I think 3 years in the House. And everybody around their kitchen table makes a budget. If they don't make it every year, certainly when they're in trouble, they start making a budget. You do really simple things like decide not to go out to eat, stop your magazine subscriptions, the easy things first, and then the really hard decisions. And that's where we are right now, are the hard decisions. And so I think that, as a daughter and as a mother of a daughter and a mother of now a granddaughter, I think women make a lot of these decisions. I see the generations changing. I see the decisions maybe that my mom made were not as involved as the ones that I'm making. And I certainly can see that my own daughter, independent on her own, is going to be so much more empowered financially to make the decisions. So let's not leave her and the next generations holding a big IOU on their back. Let's take the opportunity. And it's another question I get is, well, why? We've raised the debt ceiling how many times in the past? Numerous times in the past. I think they were quoting 17 times under Ronald Reagan or something like that, if I recall correctly. And that is correct. We have raised the debt ceiling. I've voted to raise it before. But this is different. We need to seize this opportunity, because if we don't seize the opportunity to clamp down on the spending now, when the American people realize what an issue and what a problem and what a generational burden we're passing on, we have the ear of the American people, and that's the difference. That's the difference. And, a lot of things in our lives are all about timing. Certainly political lives are all about timing. Sometimes you can have the greatest candidate in the world, and if it's not the right time, they can't make it. And this is the time. This is the time for us to grab the reins, to say to the Senate and the President and the American people, we're ready, you're ready, and let's join together and do this. So I look forward to hopefully cut cap. That is a little hard to say sometimes.
It's a tongue twister.
Yes, it's a tongue twister. Cut, cap, and balance makes it through the Senate. But at least if it doesn't make it in the form we passed today, the concepts within this, cutting, capping, and balancing our budgets, are everyday events in people's lives. We need to do it here, and I look forward to joining with all my fellow women Republicans we're talking with today, but the rest of the women in the country, but also every man, woman, and child in this country, because it's all about every American, and we don't want to see an overburden on one, either the older generation, the younger generation, or the generations to come. So thank you for having this, and I look forward to working together.
Thank you so much. And now I'd like to yield to one of my fellow freshman colleagues who I have gotten to be very good friends with. She is an incredible individual. She is a great person to be serving with. I truly appreciate all of her input, thoughtful comments. We discuss issues every day here in Congress, and I yield to my good friend Sandy Adams from Florida.
Thank you. And I join my fellow Republican women today to come and talk to you about what we passed yesterday, cut, cap, and balance. And I want to reach out to the American people and tell them why. August 2nd is quickly approaching. And what we have heard from our president is first the Biden talks, then it was the grand bargain, then it was, the McConnell-Reed deal, then it was Gang of Six. Again, all of these are proposals, all of these are ideas, nothing on paper, nothing to be scored by the Congressional Budget Office. Not one thing put down in writing so that the American people and, quite frankly, Congress knows what is truly in these plans. So now, just yesterday, the House Republicans passed cut, cap, and balance. Cut, cap, and balance with bipartisan support. It's the only legislation that has been introduced to Congress that actually addresses the debt, the deficit, and the ability to get our budget back in order, balancing our budget. The only one scored by the Congressional Budget Office. I supported that legislation, and I will continue to support it because it is the only legislation that has been brought forth to handle our debt, deficit, and our budget. Not any of these other plans that have been floated out there, spoken about, talked about. Nothing in writing. As I heard one of my colleagues say earlier, the Congressional Budget Office said, we can't score a speech. And the American people don't really know what's in that legislation unless you write it down and let them take a look at it. That is so important for the American people. They want to know what we are doing. That's why it was so important that we had cut, cap, and balance out there. The American people had a chance to read it, review it. They've seen what we have done. And I'm hearing from the people in my district that they're happy. They're happy that we have passed a responsible bill. We're facing $14.3 trillion in debt. It's equal to about 95% of our entire economy. $3.7 trillion of that was just accrued under President Obama's watch. To put that in perspective, it took the United States from 1776 to 1992 to accrue that same amount of debt that we've accrued in about 2.5 years. We're mortgaging our children's future. We're borrowing 40 cents on the dollar, much of it from the Chinese, and we are sending the bill to our children and grandchildren. This has got to stop. If we don't listen to the American people, then shame on us. We have heard them loud and clear. We know they want us to get our fiscal house in order because every day the American people are making their hard decisions on what they're going to buy, whether it's gas, whether it's prescription drugs, whether it's food, because everything is going up. And the jobs are going away. We have a high unemployment rate. We have a different credit rating places telling us, get your fiscal house in order or we are going to downgrade you. And if that happens, the American people are the ones that suffer with us. This affects each and every one of us. That is why I am proud to have supported cut, cap, and balance. That is why we stand here today talking with you, the American people, letting you know we heard you. I'm ringing the alarm. My colleagues in the House are ringing the alarms. But the Senate Democrats and this president don't seem to be listening. We have a problem, and it is not a tax problem. It is a spending problem here in Washington. We need to get that spending under control. Since 1917, I think that's when they first passed this debt ceiling legislation. And I think, personally, they passed it with hopes that Congress would never spend more than they took in. That's my opinion. I wasn't here back then. But I will tell you that year after year, Congress has voted to ignore, to move on, continue the spending without addressing the true drivers of our debt. We have to address those drivers. And if Congress isn't willing and the President isn't willing, then the American people are willing. And they're saying, send us the balanced budget amendment. Let us show you where we are on this. 49 states, 49, have a balanced budget requirement, and they're able to live within their means. We should do no less. The American people live within their means, states live within their means, and Congress and the federal government should do no less. Years of kicking the can down the road have come to an end. Reckless spending needs to stop. And the Senate's repeated failure not to pass a budget and do their jobs that has led us to this economic crossroads needs to stop. I'm asking my colleagues in the Senate, take up this bill, pass this bill, listen to the American people. They want the opportunity to vote on a balanced budget amendment. Let them. What are you afraid of? Let the American people's voices be heard. Let them vote. Americans deserve better, and we have proven that here in the House. I hope that our Senate colleagues are listening. I hope our President is listening. August 2nd is quickly approaching. You do not have a scorable plan written down, and we need to make sure that we protect our American heritage for our future generations. With that, I yield back.
Thank you so much. I now Yes.
The chair would like to receive a message for the House.
Mr. Speaker, a message from the President of the United States.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Secretary.
I am directed by the President of the United States to deliver to the House of Representatives a message in writing.
The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you. I now yield to the gentlelady from Ohio, Ms. Schmidt, for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my good friend, Mrs. Ellmers from North Carolina, for hosting this evening, because this is about America's future and about America doing what each and every woman, each and every man, each and every family has to do each and every week at their table, and that's balance the budget and pay the bills. You know, the greatest president, they say, in this century, or in the last century, was Ronald Reagan. And in his farewell speech, he said, all great change in America begins at the dinner table, and it does. It's the universe of our home life. It's where we educate our children, where we feed our children, where we stake out the ideas of how we want our future to go, where we plan parties, where we plan events, and where we discuss Grandma's departure. It is the center of our home. And it is from that I want to focus on what I think needs to be said tonight. We have to balance our budget in America, in this House, in this chamber, at this kitchen table. We've all seen what it is to take a checkbook, take the bills, and make them come together. That's what we need to do, and that's what I believe a balanced budget amendment will force this Congress and future Congresses to do, balance our checkbook. You know, just like mothers and grandmothers across this country, I have a major stake in the future of our nation. And that is not just my daughter and her wonderful husband, but my Michael and my Anthony, my wonderful little grandchildren. My father was the epitome of the American dream. He came from nothing, but he worked hard and started his business and paid the bills of those businesses at their little small kitchen table. And he grew that and gave us the opportunity to make sure that what we wanted to accomplish in the United States was available to us. And that's what I did for my daughter. And you know, when she started her little business, you know where she started it? At the kitchen table in the house she grew up in. And she's got a thriving little business. But she's got 2 little children, and we want that American dream for them. We've got to get our fiscal house in order. We cannot keep creating the debts and deficits that we are creating in this country. A balanced budget amendment will force us to do the right things for our country, just as moms and dads across the nation have to do all the time at their kitchen tables. That's live within our means. I urge the Senate to take up the balanced budget amendment. I urge this chamber to adopt it. I urge the Senate to adopt it and to make it a reality. I yield back.
Thank you so much. I now yield to my other, I say we have many, don't we? Good friend from Missouri, Ms. Hartzler, who is one of those great freshmen that I'm serving with.
Well, thank you, Renee, and we certainly appreciate you hosting this today. And I certainly am glad to lend my support of the balanced budget amendment. And you know, it goes back to my childhood, and I've shared this before, but I wanted to share this again because this is what I grew up with, and I believe it's what most Americans grew up with. I grew up on a farm, and it was just my mom and my dad and my sister and I. And every January, my mom would get out all of these ledger papers and lay them out on the kitchen table. That was before the days of computers. And each page represented a month. And she and my dad would spend days literally charting out the cash flow for our farm for the rest of the year. And they would try to estimate how much the yield was going to be on the corn and the soybeans. And they had to guess how much the price was going to be. And they researched the cost of the seed and the other inputs and the fuel. And they charted that all out. And then our mortgage payments. And they were able to, through working that pencil and erasing and reworking it, figure out how they were going to make everything work, how they were going to be able to live within their means. And it wasn't always easy, but as the year went on and conditions changed, Mother would get that eraser out and she would readjust that cash flow to make sure that we stayed in balance, made sure that we had everything that we need. And that's just common sense. That's families balancing their budget. I carry on that tradition, I do it, and people all over the Missouri's 4th District do it. Families I talk to, they say every year, we balance our budget. How come Washington does it? Every small business I visit with says, we balance our budget. How come Washington does it? Every farmer and rancher I visit with says, we balance our budget. How come Washington does it? We have got to start taking the common sense from the people and apply it here in Washington. You know, even the states, they certainly are one up on us here. 49 out of 50 of the states have a balanced budget amendment. They live within their means. Yet Washington thinks they don't need it. Well, I think they do. With a $14.3 trillion debt that we have now, it is evident that people here cannot live within their means, and they need to have the constraints of the budget. So we passed it here in the House. It was the right thing to do. It's supported by the American people. Now the Senate and the President need to get on board. Why the President would oppose our cut, cap, and balance plan, I have no idea. I want the President to share with me and with all of us and the American people why he does not support balancing our budget. We do it at home. We need to do it in Washington, and we need to do it now. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I yield. This will be you will be finishing this evening's comments. A good friend to all of us as freshmen, a mentor to us, and I thank you for coming this evening as well. It means very much that you contribute to this. Ms. Granger from Texas, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For 3 minutes.
I want to talk a little bit about my experience balancing budgets because I had to manage many different kinds of budgets and some at all the same time. As a business owner for 23 years, I had to balance my insurance company's budget. As the mayor of Fort Worth, I had to balance the city's budget. And as the mother of 3, I had to balance the household budget. What is the same about every budget I've ever balanced is that there was never any choice. There were very serious consequences for not being fiscally responsible, whether it was in my business, at City Hall, or at home. Most Americans have the same experience I've had. We all sit around the kitchen table and figure out how to make ends meet. And then we ask, why can't Washington do the same thing? Families and businesses have to balance their budgets every single day. It's only right that the federal government, with $14.3 trillion in debt, should finally have to do what all Americans already do. But when Washington is asked to balance the budget for the American people, this seems to be too tall an order. Washington could learn a thing or two from the women in Congress. 10.6 million businesses owned in the United States are owned by women, and women now make up the majority of the workforce. We're the leaders of Fortune 500 companies, but as we've taken an even greater responsibility, we haven't given anything up. We're balancing budgets at our business during the day, and when we get home, we're taking care of our family's finances, and many of us care for our aging parents and their budgets too. We know what it means to make ends meet, and we've lived up to that responsibility in every part of our lives. It's now time for Washington to do the same. I thank you, and I return the balance of my time.
Thank you so much. And with that, my good friend was pointing out the need to be following our finances. And, as more and more women are becoming business owners, and they are the breadwinners, as you can see from this chart here, once again, figuring out the bills, balancing the budget, taking care of our family members, their health care needs, so important. And in order for us to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars here in Washington, it's time for a balanced budget amendment. I'm very proud of what our House has done in a bipartisan effort yesterday, and I'm hoping that the Senate and the President will also be part of that very significant historic move so that we can get this country back on sound financial ground. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the remainder of my time.
The gentlelady yields back. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5, 2011, the gentleman from California, Mr. Garamendi, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to be joined by my colleagues today, and we were going to talk about the financial situation here in the United States and the meaning of the various ideas and proposals that have been put forward. I want to compliment my colleagues on the Republican side for their tenacity in putting out their sound bites, but I think it's very, very important for the American people to understand in detail exactly what is being proposed here. Yesterday we did have what was called the cut, cap, and balance proposal. You might also call it the cut, slash, and burn proposal, because once you get past the sound bites and get into the details of what has actually been proposed, you got to stand back and go, whoa, wait a minute. Is that really what a balanced budget amendment is all about? We're going to go into that in a few moments to really understand exactly what this balanced budget amendment is and the effect that it will have on Americans, particularly on